hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. Now in last week's video I unboxed and sort of talked about the Fallout Miniatures game Hollywood Heroes set. This week's all about getting them painted up. Now starting straight off, slightly differently to normal. In my normal videos, if you watch the channel for a while, you'll know that I kind of always leave the bases till last. Doing it around this time and starting on the bases first, so painting the black edges on all the models. Now why am I doing that? Really, genuinely just because the bases are really cool and I just fancy doing that around. There is nothing wrong with making a change. Now, sprayed the models and base coated them, sprayed them all black, sprayed Maximus, you see here in lead belcher, which is a silver colour, kind of obvious because he's covered in metal armour. Sprayed the rest of them in an army paint of spray, a desert yellow that I've not used for a while. Now, that's a bit unusual for me. I tend to paint from the same base coat, so there's nothing wrong with kind of experimenting. Now, the first thing, and the kind of reason for starting on the bases, is to make the models all look the same. So I've started off by doing Maximus's base you saw there with the army painted desert yellow that comes in a pot to make him match. So then the next stages we can do across all the models at the same time. So now it's taking the metal. So I'm taking a gunmetal colour. You see, I'm going to put the colours up the top left of the screen all the way through. If I repeat a colour, I probably won't do that, but you don't have to use the same colours. But it's going through now with the gunmetal, because again, I'm trying to make all the bases match. So the gunmetal colours onto the pipes, the guns, all those kind of things. Although you can see here, I didn't do it on the Ghoul, but I went back and did it afterwards. Then I've gone through all the models, or we'll be going through all the models, doing the details on the bases. So picking up the rocks across all the different bases here. Now the bases have been done to sort of replicate different parts of the show. And obviously in different parts of the show, the terrain they're walking across was different coloured. But I've kind of chosen to make the bases all match together rather than having like 4 different base colours, for example. And actually in the bases themselves, you can see here with the dog, that actually he's got the hand in his mouth, which is from one scene, but then you've got the rad roach on the base, which is from another scene. So even they do the same sort of thing. So I've gone through and done a grey across all the rocks, across all the models. I'm taking a bone white and picking out the bone details. So you see here there's like a skull on Lucy's base, there's a whole kind of torso. Maybe around some of the colours you won't need to use on all the bases because there's maybe not skulls and bones on others. There's maybe not elements of red that we're using here on all the bases. But going through in a batch like this certainly speeds the process up. So doing a red on the fencing here. And again, really nice little details. You could pick any colour, you could follow exact colour schemes, or you could just do what feels right for you at the moment when you're painting, and that's kind of the approach that I took. Whilst I've based the colour schemes and based the bases off parts of the series, I've used my own colours that I just think will look nice because obviously, well, my miniatures, kind of why not. Now going on to the Vadroach, I thought I'd go for a sort of really kind of unusually coloured khaki. This is actually an English uniform colour meant for painting English World War II uniforms, but I thought it fitted into the kind of vibe of Fallout because it is a bit of a, you know, grim, gritty, dark thing whilst having the sort of comedy elements of colour. I'm trying to take that with these models here, trying to make, when you see the actual models painted, trying to take the sort of most of the characters and keep them quite dulled down, whereas Lucy wants a bit more vibrancy in, and the bases I just wanted to have them all kind of the same so it looks like they're all crossing the same terrain, even that's not quite what the bases are doing. Now you see there with the Lucy model, the steps, because it's as she's coming out of the vault, so the steps have got a nice grey on there, and it really, I just felt the base lacked a bit of colour variance. So I'm taking this beastie brown colour, which is a colour I use all the time on my bases and my models. It's a really nice kind of earthy tone, and just putting it on in patches across the base, just to break up the kind of monotony there. I didn't put any of that colour though on where the cracked earth is showing. Now, time for a bit of shade. Now normally, again, if you watch the channel, you'll know that I get the whole model painted, including the base, and then I'll put the same colour shade over the whole model. Some of the joy of doing a totally different set of miniatures for a while, though, is to experiment with what you're doing. So in this case, I'm taking an Agrax Earth shade, which is a Games Workshop shade colour, and just doing it on the base. You can see that I'm being quite careful not to hit Maximus's helmet that's on the ground, and just going round into all the gaps and cracks and crevices around here, into the rather cool footprints left by the monster that he's obviously fought. Now, after that shade has dried on all the models, which it now has, it's time to bring back up those bases. So you see here just an old scratty dry brush that I'm using, and a very gentle dry brush of that desert yellow just across all the base areas, again just to lift it a little bit. And that's kind of how I do my technique. You know, I'm not the greatest painter in the world. I get serviceable paint jobs that'll look good either on the battlefield or in your cabinet, but not super detailed. And how I like to paint is the base colours, the wash layers, and then highlighting things up here. So I'm using exactly the same colours I've used before. So you can see here the highlighting the body that was on the ground, or the skeleton that was on the ground, Lucy's base. So some edge highlighting on the ribs to pick those out there, and then into the hip bones and those kind of things. So I find this technique great. It means you don't have to get too many paints if you don't have a big collection. I do have a big collection of paints. But basically you're doing the base colours, washing it, which brings the level down and the tone down, and then you can use the same paint you've already used to do this kind of highlight layer. So I've again gone around, you see they're highlighting all the wood layers, all the reds, whatever, and it adds just a really nice little level of detail, but it's not completely in your face. Like some paint schemes will put some real very, very vibrant highlight layers on the very top to really bring out that kind of contrast. I personally don't like that style. I think this is a bit more subtle, a bit more what I like, but again, you don't have to paint like I do, and I'm not the best painter in the world. So now onto the base, obviously the Radroach, for some real weird blood and ichor, a little bit of Nurgle's Rot here, which again the Games Workshop paint. You'll notice I'm using a mix of Vallejo and Games Workshop, and that's one of my favourite paints because it's my biggest army is my Death Guard. If you watch the thing and you play 40k, you'll know what I'm talking about. Right, now to the actual models. So we've dealt with the bases, all the models look quite nice, and they're all quite blended together. Onto the actual models, and there's nothing rocket sciencey in this really. Picking up a black, painting Maximus's hair black, putting some black sections on here. Now you'll see with the 4 models you look there, you'll notice Lucy's also got black hair, but in the background I haven't done that, and I didn't. I painted each model individually here because I wanted just to delve into the experience of painting that model, but the paint stayed on my wet palette and I painted them really quite quickly, so I was still able to use all the paints that were on there and kind of not waste any. So into a sort of chocolate brown onto the face. There's not a lot of detail on Maximus here, there really isn't. I was going to put other things on there, but the vast majority, obviously he's in armour. You watch the series and really it's just very, very metallic. So it's the sort of the wash and the after details that will do that make a difference. But I took a little bit of red and did an approximation of the symbol on his chest that's been slashed through by the claws. Took a little bit of that red and put it kind of onto his lips, and a tiny, tiny bit of an off-white colour into his eyes. To do that, you could do black, but I felt it gives a bit more of a pop with the white, whereas later on I'll be doing Lucy's eyes black rather than white, so a little bit strange. I don't go into too much detail on faces. Now, I'd already at this point painted Lucy and kept looking at Maximus on the bench and went, no, I want to put a little bit more detail into the cables. So actually I'm using the black colour I've already used, but again, hasn't dried out because it was on a wet palette. And just taking that black and putting the black into some of the cabling around the model just to make it a little bit less monotone. Now it is monotone, and again this is the thing about varying from the series to paint jobs to whatever. It's really about what your model's going to look like on the table, and you might want to do something that isn't quite necessarily in the series or adds a different bit of colour. You could just go radical. Now, what you can't go radical on really is Lucy's colour scheme. So starting off with the blue across all of her trousers and things. Now, if you watch the channel a lot, you'll know that I do undercoat metallics all the time, and that's tends to be my typical base coat. And I wanted to try something different here, really. So I tried the desert yellow because it makes the base colour kind of work, and I wanted to see what it'd be like painting off a desert yellow base. Now, it's not bad, it's absolutely fine actually. Really, what you paint the base off doesn't really matter, but the yellow adds a bit more vibrancy to the colours than a black undercoat would, or a silver undercoat would, but it also does as well. It's a little bit of a shiny base coat, and it was actually quite difficult putting the paint on in cases because it adds a weird shine to the paint I'm putting on top of. I don't know if that's because the spray can's a bit old, probably had that spray can for 10 years. But yeah, I think if I was doing this again, I'd probably go from an off-white spray, or I'd just go the whole hog and spray all my models silver so you've got the same kind of colour scheme. But I don't regret it in that sense because it's always good to learn things, but it is making the colours I chose more vibrant. So that kind of leather colour I've just painted on across all of her straps and pouches and things like that is shinier and brighter than it is normally when I put it onto a different colour base coat. So I suppose bear that one in mind. Now we're going on to the patch areas on the bag and everything, so we've done all the blues on there, and this is a green ochre colour, and I'm doing this to start off the kind of yellow base coat that she would have. So we've gone through that green ochre colour, and they've done it on the striping and the piping and things and onto the bag sections, and then taking a yellow and putting that onto the stripes and things there. I could have gone probably straight for yellow with this undercoat because the desert yellow undercoat is a sort of yellowy one, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to go a bit patchy and strange on top of this undercoat, so I put that green ochre layer on first and then went back over with yellow, and it kind of worked a little bit better and added a few nice tones kind of in there as we're painting. I suppose that's something I should say in the video here. I'm learning while I'm doing this, you know, a different base coat than I normally would, trying some different colours, seeing how they react on a different colour base coat to how I'm used to them reacting. So I had a few surprises when going through here, and a few things popped up that went, oh, that's not how that colour normally looks on top of a silver base coat or a black base coat. So it's never a bad thing to learn. You might not want to try and experiment on an expensive set of models like these are. You might want to experiment on some cheap ones. But hey ho, I like just to dive headfirst into projects. Now onto the flesh, onto a very small brush here, because when you've got Lucy's hair painted, like you've seen there, painted in black, there are some very small gaps to get things in here. So small brush, getting into the flat flesh, and for some reason the camera's having real trouble picking up on Lucy, because for some reason the blue, how it reacted, made it really, really shiny. Right, onto what I think probably now in my mind is the best model in the set, onto the Ghoul. And again, in the series, his leather coat and leather hat is not quite this colour. I wanted to go for a slightly lighter colour because I wanted it to be a little bit more variance between all the different colour shades I was going to use, and I particularly like this one. So this is into the English uniform colour again that you've already seen me doing onto the Rad Roach, and I just really like that colour, and I thought it would look great across the model. Now I was going to do his leather in the colour that we did the leather on Lucy, and thought no, I really don't like how that looked in terms of on the model. It's fine for Lucy, but not for the Ghoul. I wanted his tones all to kind of blend together, so I went for a flat brown colour to go across all his bandoliers and his pistol holster and all those kind of things. So I'm glad I did him after Lucy and learned that I didn't like how that paint reacted on top of that desert yellow. So you've obviously got his lever action holster across his back there. Yeah, really, really cool. I just love this model the actual character in the series, and really enjoyed this model. Actually, I think this is probably the most evocative models in terms of his posing, the equipment he's got on him, those kind of things. Right, and you see here, so again, I've taken a lighter brown colour. Now, I would say, obviously, I do put up on the screen there the browns and the colours that I use, but really, I would take any sort of 3 closely toned browns, and I think they'd work absolutely fine on this model. But I would definitely do that and separate the browns out. Don't just paint him all in the same brown. You could do, and then you could rely on the highlighting that you would do afterwards. But I think really how I've done it, I quite like in terms of 1 brown for the leather, which I thought a dark brown so it stands out, and 2 lighter browns for his clothing afterwards. Now we're going into Rakkar flesh for his skin, so not a normal human flesh colour, it's actually more of a zombie flesh colour, which he kind of is. Onto just the skin there, most of his skin's covered so it wasn't too long, and into the same beige brown colour that the wood was done on the base painting scheme before. Now it's some tiny details. He really is the only model that I've done any tiny details on. So a little bit of Retributor armour into the rounds that are sticking out of his bandolier, and onto his belt buckle. And then I took a bit of a red colour and put that into the other rounds on his bandolier, because there's kind of 2 types of ammo that's sticking out of his bandolier. And that's the Ghoul done for now. Now, onto the dog. This was the one that I was probably a little bit more scared about, because I don't do animals very often, and they can be quite fiddly to do. The hand sticking out of his mouth, dead easy. Use the same flesh colour that we did on the Ghoul to kind of make it look like a bit of rotten flesh. And then I actually took the brown that we did Lucy's leather with, and I painted that on his collar, because I thought that brown works for him, wouldn't have worked for the Ghoul. Now I'm using 3 colours to paint the dog. I'm doing it in fast speed here. Using the black, which you'll see me putting onto kind of his back and darker areas. We're using the pale brown we used on the Ghoul's kind of underclothing, and we're using the green ochre that we used on Lucy's yellow strapping before we actually put the yellow on top. The green ochre is kind of a 1 stage off this desert yellow. You can see I'm putting that on the paws and the ends of the ankles and things, and then using the pale brown into the next areas and then the black on the top, and I'm going at it when they're all wet because I want them to blend and merge into each other as I'm painting, to give that kind of, we don't want stark, or I don't want stark lines between these colours. Now once I've done that over the entire model, I then go back over with those different colours and pick out and highlight areas that I'm not happy on. So see there, I put a couple of blotches onto his back, and then moving on to a lighter colour to put some blotches and things back onto the feet. So I've kind of wet blended across the whole model with those 3 colours. Again, putting the paler colours on the raised areas, the black right across his back and onto tips of things, and also I put some black, direct black, onto his sort of nose and eyes. So kind of wet blended across the model, and it was a little bit daunting because I'm not great at painting animals, but you know, it's a bit of fun to try it, and I have got some videos on wet blending if you want to see a little bit more what I've done. But it was taking those 3 colours and merging them across the sort of fur. Now, when all the paints have dried, and this was all in one painting session, I didn't paint for most of the week. I was busy away at work, and then just did a session where I got all 4 models base coats done, let them thoroughly dry, and then we're doing a wash of Seraphim Sepia. Now this is a different wash that I normally use. I normally use the Vallejo one, which is a much dirtier one. The Games Workshop one is a bit cleaner, so I won't have to do as much work afterwards. Now in terms of Maximus's work afterwards, hopefully you can see here the camera's got real problems with the camera this week for some reason. All I'm taking is a gunmetal colour that matches the original spray, and putting it in to the areas where there's claws of hit to show the fresh damage, and also putting some silver around the model on the most heavily used areas, you know, the cogs and wheels and those kind of things. And now with the rest of the models, it's exactly like we did with the base. Not necessarily going to show it all, but it's going around using all the previous colours we've used to do some highlighting. And then the last bit of detail I've done is on Lucy here, a little bit of black into her eyeballs and a little bit of red onto her lips, just to give a little bit more facial difference. And that's as simple as it is, just using the highlighting layer with exactly the same colours. I have given them a matte spray, and you'll see here how Lucy kind of isn't as bright and vibrant anymore because the matte has dulled it down a little bit, because again the paint will react really weird on her model. And here's the painted set of 4. Really quite pleased with how they've come out. You know, the Ghoul particularly is probably my favourite model. Enjoyable set, enjoyable little diversion to do. Hopefully you liked that. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you on another video.